You know,
It's just a little heavy.
we're here today at Bentley Pascoe's place. Lovely American fish keeper. This is part 2 of his fish room tour. No secrets this time around.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I can't promise anything.
We're out here in his display tanks. We're checking out his display tanks instead of his breeding. So this is sort of the other part, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the other part of his fish room, but his whole house is a fish room. So if you ever get the chance, you should call him on the phone. Hold on, let me get his phone number. No. Hit him up on YouTube, Bentley Pascoe on YouTube. Check him out, and he'll keep you updated on all these crazy projects he has. But for today, we're going to go through and talk about some of his display tanks. So what do we got here?
So this is technically, I think, 135. I mean, the math works out to like 139. They call them 150s, whatever. It's an old giant glass tank.
Yeah.
This is my mostly Rainbowfish community tank. But, I mean, you'll see some random stuff that have come from, like, random fish adoptions where there's, like, this big angelfish or this blue acara here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got your kind of obligatory roseline sharks. There's some cherry barbs, some Caiathedainios. It's kind of just a hodgepodge. There's one random glowfish somewhere in here that I adopted from a guy. It's hiding. It's bright pink. You can't miss it when you do see it. But a lot of times, it's right over here.
Oh, there it is.
It's like totally doesn't fit in. But yeah, this was my first big tank when I came back to the hobby. And it's basically been my like slow, ever evolving passion project.
When you came back to the hobby, where'd you go?
I stopped keeping fish for like a decade. So like I kept fish from childhood before I can even remember, with my parents, of course, doing most of the work, but me picking a lot of fish as a kid, all the way up until college, where like my cousin and I lived together, and we had a little South American cichlid tank with like a Jack Dempsey, Red Devil, a lot of your aggressive butthead fish. And eventually, as would happen with poor college kids, it was a bow front, and it blew a bottom front seam, because bow fronts do that.
Yeah.
And we couldn't afford to find a way to house them anywhere else to fix it long enough. So it was eventually, we found a pet store that we trusted, and just was like, hey, can you just take these? They did big cichlids at the time, and then from there on out, I stopped keeping fish until basically 2016 is when I came back to the hobby. And then it was kind of one of those things where it's in my house that I'm in now. I was randomly watching some YouTube, and I came across, very specifically, I remember this continuity from The Green Machine and James Finley, which is this amazing, beautiful, shallow tank with this gorgeous red rock.
James Finley has a new video out. Came out the other day.
And it's fantastic.
Check it out.
It's fantastic. And there's a faster, like, time-lapse version of it that's out, too, that's great. He's got a new book, all that kind of stuff. But I saw that, and I was like, man, I really miss fish.
Yeah.
And in the process of, like, 3 days, I watched probably 3 years worth of their content, and then kind of started branching out. And the next kind of major YouTube channel I found was Aquarium Co-Op. And then for the longest time, up until his 50,000 subscriber video, which
Who's this Aquarium Co-op?
it's Kobe or something like that.
Jimmy, right?
Oh yeah, that guy off camera. Hey, buddy. But I had no clue he was in Washington, little in the Seattle area,
Right.
until his 50,000 subscriber video, and I see all these like shots of the Space Needle and a local hip hop artist. So I'm like, wait, what the? I finally figured out, like, oh, he's in Edmonds. It's an hour drive, and so like that the next day I drove up there, and it's been my local store ever since.
Ever since.
Even though it's an hour drive, I'll make that drive anytime. I'm much happier to make that drive, and slowly but surely, got this tank going. I was originally going to do just lots of small community schooling fish, because that's what I was really into as a kid. Yeah, that changed really fast, because I watched the tour of this like not very well known fish keeper named Gary Lang. And
He's got jokes, kids.
I try. They're terrible, but I try. And I saw Bozeman rainbows, and I'd never seen them as a kid. And it was this very much a like, okay, no, I have to have that.
Right.
And at some point, Aquarium Co-op and Robert and Allie, they're wonderful employees that work there. They knew me well enough because I was in there like almost every week. and they knew I wanted to eventually do rainbowfish, and somebody had to break down their tank. So a good number of the adult rainbows that are in here came from that person's tank, and literally just adopted all of their tank.
Yeah.
So I went straight to having some adult rainbows, and then from there I just kind of have slowly collected more or bred them. You saw in the previous video, I've got a bunch of fry raising up from Gary Lang that came from eggs, and I've bred a couple of the species that are in this tank. It's just kind of my thing. I just really love rainbows. I've really fallen in love with them. And I love planet tanks, and they happen to go together very, very well.
Hand in hand.
And this has been the kind of the slow labor of love, even though sometimes it likes to be a bit of a jerk to me.
Right, so most of the plants you have in here are pretty, you know, not, I wouldn't say easy, but low maintenance kind of plants.
Yeah.
Mostly. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Well, originally, I've changed the stem plants like 5 times, and a lot of that is I'm a very, very active participant of our local club's horticulture awards program.
Right.
So I'm, as you saw in some of the other tanks, I'm constantly growing, trying new plants, looking for something different and interesting, and I've tried so many stems in this thing, and a lot of it has been like, I'm tired of this aesthetic. It's been there for 6 months. I'm going to change just the stems. But a lot of the other stuff, like the Anubias, the lotuses, I don't plan on ever changing those because I love those plants so much. Mm-hmm. But like at one point, this piece of spiderwood used to have a lot of moss on it. It still has a little bit. I've slowly been ripping it off because I just don't have the amount of flow to keep the Physidens fontanus that was on this looking perfect. Mm-hmm. It looked okay, but not the way I wanted it. So it'll probably eventually just be me trimming a lot of like the non-appetit or something that's in here and fleshing it out with that, or removing it entirely and trying something else.
Yeah.
And now they're all fighting. They're actually trying to spawn right now in this giant cluster of death.
Spawning fish. Yeah, that blue Acara is a monster.
He's a big boy.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I love is it, like, I was mentioning it to Jimmy earlier, Acaras when they're solo are, for the most part, perfectly peaceful. There are some that will be jerks, but most of them are, they're only that typical cichlid behavior when they pair up, and then they get territorial trying to prepare for breeding and protecting their young. But when they're solo, they're very common in a lot of people's like community rainbow tanks or any kind of community tank because they're pretty chill.
Yeah. And
being a cichlid, they're super personable. You can get them very used to where they'll always be at the front of your tank, always looking for attention, always begging for food, typical fish stuff. But
well, you know me, I think you should have lots.
Yeah. And if it wasn't something I adopted, I might almost consider like just a blue Acara tank because I have really fallen in love with that particular fish.
Yeah.
But then I would have less room for rainbow fish.
Right.
And that kind of goes counter to like my core love at this point.
Yeah, of the rainbows.
Yeah,
that's your mainstay for sure.
Definitely, and it's one of the things where like I would love to at some point.
It's not that you have every rainbow fish in here; it's that you have most of them represented.
I have a good number.
Yeah.
And a lot of
most of the varietals. You know.
Yeah, a lot of the like your common ones, your turquoise, your bosemana, your Irians, all that kind of stuff. But I got some kind of fun, less common stuff in there too. A couple different species of Australians, like there's goldie-eyed Decais, which are actually pretty hard to get a hold of, and gorgeous when they show their full color and flare and all that stuff. But you know, there's everything from like high quality Gary Lang rainbows to like common raised in a pond in Florida, like my Blaheri down here, who's like salmon colored, which is not the color they're supposed to be. But that's because their genetics gets kind of wonky. But I still love this fish.
Right.
Like, I kind of like that weird salmony color when he lights his head up, that bright stripe of fluorescent orange. It's still super fun to watch.
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks Bentley for having us out to check out one of your display tanks. We'll walk around and shoot some other ones.
Yeah.
But that's a video for today. You should definitely check out Bentley on YouTube. If you don't, what does that mean?
You miss out some sweet rainbows.
You're missing out on some sweet rainbows.
Maybe some tips on how to grow plants better. Is that's one of the things that I really preach.
Maybe some tips on how to grow plants better.
Some
maybe
guppies. Maybe some other stuff.
All right. Later.